flesh as nothing, right? As done, instead of boasting in it as if it's the good thing, right? I don't look at what I see manifested in my flesh and boast in that as if that's the thing that justifies me, right? I also don't try to be justified in what I see in my flesh, right? I'm justified in the word God has spoken. So I don't need to try to gain acceptance by getting people to accept what they see in my flesh. That's actually living by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil again. Now you're just changing the knowledge of good and evil. Yes. You're saying our knowledge of good and evil now includes this to be good, is what it's saying, right?
And it becomes self-justification. That's all it is.
Yeah, it becomes just another hint on self-justification, right? Whereas what you would want people to see is that they're not justified by anything they see in their flesh. Neither is what they see in their flesh the evidence that they're good or evil. Right. It's because so many times what can happen is people will point at what they see in our flesh as if that is the proof we're not justified, and then we'll fight to prove the thing that's in our flesh is actually the proof we're justified. Instead of letting it go all together, Christ would come and say, lay it all down, right? Neither what you see in your flesh or don't see in your flesh could ever justify you. So don't fight for acceptance through something that's manifesting in your flesh, right? Right. So what a better thing would be to do is for the church to not implement a system of judging people based on what they see in their flesh, and implement a system of all people are welcome and then a preaching of the gospel. Right. Instead of a differentiation of people by what they see in their flesh. Because if we bring them in through boasting in their flesh, then that's going to equal a whole lot of destruction and chaos in the body, is what that's going to end up equaling, right? That would be like the guy in Romans, if he were to, or not Romans, but Corinthians, he was busy with his father's wife. And so if the church in Corinth was to say, well, we want to accept all people, so that's okay, that's good. That guy was boasting in it, right? As if it was life. It isn't life, it's actually the fruit of death. Now, we don't reject you based on whether you have the fruit of life or the fruit of death going on, but we're not going to boast in something that is the fruit of death, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
We're not going to be all, like, this is the great thing. Hallelujah, isn't it wonderful? Right? Because that's not the fruit of life.
Nope.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
But you could say the same thing about fear or anxiety or any of that. We don't shame someone who's experiencing that, but we're not going to come together and be proud of our fear, are we?
No.
Or our anxiety, are we? No. And so it's the same kind of a thing, right? Like Jeremiah has the claustrophobia. He's neither ashamed nor proud of his claustrophobia. So we don't rejoice about the gospel and say, glory to God, we can be claustrophobic. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
No, what you said, the key thing was we accept all people and then we preach the gospel.
That's right. And we neither judge each other after the flesh, because whatever we want to judge about somebody else in the flesh, I guarantee you each of us has either just recently overcome something or also has something going on that we're trying to overcome, right? And so we're not going to count one as being better or worse than another, right? And we're going to recognize, have eyes to see how this could happen and not judge them to just be full of rebellion in the sense of, screw you. You see what I'm saying? We're not going to take on the mindset of the church that says, well, it's just something they choose. It's not that simple. It's much more complicated. I think we did the Bible study using Jeremiah as a reference. Jeremiah didn't choose to be claustrophobic. He just finds he's experiencing something, right? So it's not an intellectual choice that people go through. It's something they feel because of something they've encountered in the world that come against them that wasn't born from God, right? And so they have a compelling feeling inside of them. It isn't an intellectual choice, okay? Like the claustrophobic thing. And this could upset people, but I'll just say it. You don't have to agree with this. I was born claustrophobic. There's a difference between being created one way and being born a way.
Right.
I don't know if you guys seen babies that are born way in advance and that are preemies. They're little real people. They have heads and brains and hands. Listen, they have thoughts and they encounter stimuli and they're able to formulate thoughts and consider and think on things, right? And so there's a big difference between being created a way and being born a way, because while you got 9 months in the belly, you can be exposed to something that could, even in that place, mess up your thinking.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
If you play music, it's a proven scientific fact that music impacts the fetus,
Right.
the baby inside of the womb. The baby is able to experience something. It's a proven fact that the baby can experience things that the mother is experiencing, right? It can have an impact. When my mom was pregnant with me, I was born claustrophobic. As early as I could remember, I was just claustrophobic, and I never knew why. Now, I know God didn't create me claustrophobic, but I can tell you what, from as early as I can remember, I got into a tight space. I was going to freak out. And I didn't know why it was there or what it was. I just feel it. It wasn't an intellectual choice. I didn't say, well, I guess I'll be claustrophobic. Let's go with that.
Right.
It was just it was a feeling that came against me from the earliest I can remember. Then one day, I'm like 12, 13, 14 years old. I'm flipping through the family album. Just, you know how you have the family albums.
Right.
And I get to my mom she's pregnant, and she has this stretchy band over her stomach that is stretched over her fully extended 9-month belly. And you could see it pressing in on her belly. And immediately it hit me. And I said, who are you pregnant with? And she's like, oh, you. When I was pregnant with you, I think she fell off my dad's motorcycle and cracked some ribs. She somehow cracked some ribs in like month 8 or 9, and they stuck this stretchy band on her stomach that pressed in big time on her stomach while she was pregnant with me. That impacted me.
Oh, yeah.
I felt pressed in on. And so something was able to impact my heart with fear even when I was in the womb. Okay? Now, that caused me to be born claustrophobic, not created claustrophobic,
Right.
but having been exposed to stimuli that made me claustrophobic, right?
Yeah.
Now, so people can have experiences like that, or they can have an experience when they're very young, right? It doesn't have to be similar to that. It can also be when they're very young.
Sure.
That something has come against them that isn't true, that isn't born of God. They could have an experience where they feel something,
Right.
and their heart makes a conclusion about what they feel, and then their heart runs with it like it's the truth. And it becomes their truth, but not the truth.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Right?
Right.
So the church could go a long ways in dealing with people from that foundation, understanding the bondage that can come against a person, why it can come against a person, not trying to despise them. You can connect with them on a level that makes sense to them, and that's the best way for them to experience freedom. Because if you come to a person and act like they're just making an intellectual choice, but they're experiencing a very real feeling, your intellectual choice talk immediately sounds like nonsense to them.
That's right.
And they immediately think
reject
you
it.
don't know what you're talking about anything. Right? And so after that, anything you say is blah, 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 blah. Right?
Yep.
Now, you can make a choice to abstain from sexual intercourse, but you can't make a choice about what you feel. Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so if we could engage from that foundation, they'd be more apt to hear. And if hearing, we know that freedom comes.
Yeah.
Right? I'm actually not claustrophobic anymore. I don't actually know when I got set free. I just know that I don't feel it anymore. Right? And it didn't even occur to me till I went and picked up Jeremiah from the airport, and we were going to get on the elevator. And he's like, oh, brother, you don't remember? I can't get on the elevator.
No.
And I was like, what do you mean you can't get on the elevator? He's like, oh, I'm claustrophobic, man. And all of a sudden it hit me that it doesn't bother me at all to get in the elevator anymore.
Well, sometimes understanding sets you free from what you're in bondage to. Not sometimes. A lot.
A
Yes,
lot.
A lot.
Yes.
Exactly. I used to get on the elevator and be afraid if that thing were to stop.
Yeah.
Like in between the floors. And like if I was stuck on that thing, every time I got on an elevator, I used to think this thing could stop.
Mhm.
And I would like immediately be scanning the thing like a soldier, thinking, can I bust open the top and climb out the top? Can I kick open the doors? And just at some point, it stopped impacting me. And I didn't realize it till I picked up Jeremiah. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, I don't even care. I rode up the elevator on the way here and I didn't even think about
Yeah,
it.
right.
Right? I didn't even realize that I'd been set free. But I had a very real issue.
Mhm.
Right? It wasn't like some small thing. When me and my brothers were wrestling and making the tents, houses, you know how you use the clothespin and you make the forts? We'd make the tents and we'd get to wrestling, and the moment a sheet or a blanket got put over my head, it was like the Incredible Hulk was born inside of me, and like a superhuman strength where I would just throw people off of me just to get out of that.
Yeah.
Right?
I will say this though, being claustrophobic is very much not Jeremiah Johnson.
That is true.
When you think of Jeremiah Johnson, you don't think of claustrophobic.
No.
You're right. You're right. You don't. I completely forgot about it. You know, oh, brother, we got to take the stairs.
Just go.
Jay, did you remember to start the recording?
I did. Yes.
And so, yeah.
Once a year or something.
But we talked about that in the next week's Bible study. The church would be served well to interpret people's struggles that way, right? And it goes into kind of what we talked about, why God believes the best about everyone. The Bible talks about the presumptuous sin and the sins of ignorance.
Right.
And it makes a distinction between the presumptuous sin and the sins of ignorance, right? And the sin of ignorance would very much be along the lines of what Paul said. The good that I want to do, I find I'm not doing. And in fact, I find myself doing the opposite. And I find there's a law inside my flesh that I'm coming under the power of, right? And so it would serve the church well if they could make a distinction between this, right? The presumptuous sin that is a choice is to reject grace.
Mm-hmm.
Reject life by the Spirit of grace.
Right.
That is a choice. That's the presumptuous sin. Any other sin or any other manifestation of the fruit of the flesh we see in somebody is a result of a person coming under the bondage of death because they chose the flesh for life instead of grace, right? And then they're all the time looking to their flesh for life, right? To be justified through their flesh, to be justified by what they see in their flesh, to be justified by whether or not they think they see that they have life in their flesh, to be justified by whether or not they think they see they have life in the world. And now they've come in bondage to something called the fear of death, the fear of being separated from some good thing I need to have peace and love and joy and kindness and long suffering and meekness and faithfulness. And if you find that born in your heart, it will take you captive and cause you to do all kinds of things to try to get it through the flesh.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? I mean, we just said a whole lot of mouthfuls.
Yeah, we did.
Right? But the Bible talks about, when you look even in the Old Testament, it talks a lot about sacrifices for the presumptuous sin, and it talks about sacrifices for the sins of ignorance. And it makes a very real distinction between the two. I think it's Numbers 15 or Numbers 21, where the guy who picks up the sticks. If you remember the guy who picked up the sticks, that would have been the presumptuous sin. There isn't a sacrifice to atone for that sin because there's no sacrifice that can atone for a person rejecting Christ for life. That's what Jesus told the Pharisees. All manner of sins shall be forgiven, but the blaspheming of the Holy Ghost can't be forgiven.
Right.
It's not that God's going to be angry and strike you down with a thunderbolt. It's that he can't give you life if you don't want the only thing that gives life.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
If you reject what gives life, he can't now say, well, I was wrong. There's another way unto life. Go ahead and have it this way. Right? He can't, he's not a liar. The serpent can't give life. Right? And so he can't now say, well, I was wrong. The serpent can give life. Right? So the Bible talks a lot about that, and it would help us to understand the difference and understand what's going on in a person's heart when they have the works of the flesh manifesting in them, instead of us judging the thoughts and intents of their hearts as them being purposefully evil or malicious or rebellious or any of those things, right? if we could see it's another thing going on there, right? And they're even being tormented by it, right? I got a lot of, I mean, if we want to use this language, I don't know if it's politically correct now or not, because I'm not in the politically correct spectrum. I got a lot of friends who have struggled in their lives with homosexuality. And not a single one of them, through the course of me knowing them, were ever happy about it.
Yeah.
They never were happy about it. They went through a period of time trying to not feel it, to cry out to God. And then some of them continue in that place where they feel tormented. And then some of them have, at the cost of not knowing what to make of it, had just said, I don't know what else to say besides I'm just this way.
Yeah.
Right? And in
sense.
order to try to have peace with what they're experiencing, they just go with it, trying to give themselves peace. Right? Instead of seeing they've been washed clean. Right? Peace can't come by trying to justify the fruit you see in your life. Peace doesn't come that way. Peace only comes by seeing you've been washed clean by the word, by the water of the word. Right? In the Old Testament, they had washings that you would, baptisms they called it, and you would be washed by the water so that the filth of the flesh could be cleansed, meaning the fruit of the flesh.
Right.
Well, we've been washed by the water of the word once for all time. That's the only thing that can give us peace with what's going on in our life. We can't have peace by trying to convince ourselves that what's going on in our life is good.
Yeah.
Because our conscience will all the while condemn us.
Yes, right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. To me, yeah, I don't know about.
I'm sorry, I said a whole lot of mouthfuls, so anybody can jump in, disagree, ask questions, seek clarification, whichever way you like it.
Yeah, no, that was good. That was very good. Anybody?
That might be the slowest I talked in a long time.
You did good. Yeah.
I was even taking breaths.
So what did you talk about on Sunday?
We just did the Bible study,
Okay.
so I don't really remember what we talked about.
Yeah, a bunch of different things.
Yeah. Okay.
It was good.
I
Yeah, we
know,
missed it.
It was the week before, and I can't right now bring up a thing to talk about, but I know Beulah was wishing that we would have done a Bible study on the week before. So you got something, Beulah, to start us off? Can't hear you. She's on mute.
We still can't hear you.
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
I said to myself, I should listen to that message again because they might want to talk about that tonight. That was just so wonderful.
Yes, but now we can't remember it.
Why God believes the best about everyone.
Oh,
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. got
It was awesome.
Now I remember.
Yeah,
Now that it's going.
it was really powerful.
Yeah.
My brother was home recovering from a medical procedure, and I don't hardly ever talk to my brother, and he doesn't hardly ever text me or anything. He texted me, and I said, "How are you feeling?" He said, "I'm bored," because he had to stay home from work for a few days for recovery. I said, "Well, if you're bored, why don't you listen to this message, because it's one of the best messages I've ever heard." He
Uh-huh.
said, "Okay,"
Oh,
and he did. I sent it to him.
oh, that was great.
I said, "Well, what'd you think?" He said, "He talks fast."
He
I said, "Well, listen to it again and again and again." But it was the first time he's ever heard you.
Yeah.
And even in that one, I talk slower, I think, than I normally do.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was unusual. Yeah.
But the connection is, what is it about God that he's still able to believe the best about someone when they're transgressing him? What is it about his heart that when he sees somebody, even when they're transgressing him, he still thinks of them as a treasure? Because the world was dead in their sin, and Jesus called us a treasure. We were reconciled while we were ungodly. That means an equal exchange of two parties of equivalent value. So God still saw the value of human as equivalent to the value of himself.
Right.
Right? While we were dead, not after, while. So what is it about God that when someone transgresses him, he's able to say something like, forgive them, They don't know what they're doing.
Right.
What is it about God that when somebody transgresses him, he's able to bless the person that's cursing him? Right? Bless means to speak well of.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So what is it about God that he can even say something nice and kind about someone who's nailing them to a cross? What is it about God? And the thing that it is it's his heart. It's the faith in his heart. It's the way he sees things. It's the way he discerns what's happening there. He doesn't discern that it's not happening. He's not playing mind games with himself.
Right.
He doesn't say, well, it's not really happening. It is happening. He was nailed to a cross. He didn't lose sight of the fact that he was nailed to a cross. He knows he was nailed to a cross. But what is it about what God thinks about what was going on in these people that they nailed him to a cross that allows him to say, forgive them? They know not what they do. That allows him to bless them while they're cursing him. That allows him to pray for them while they're persecuting him. What is it about God when he looks at that thing that he's able to live from that foundation? What is it about God that when that's happening to him, he's not busy desiring the destruction of those that are doing it? Right? Because the Bible says that God takes no pleasure in the destruction of the wicked.
Right.
But that, you know what that means? That means he doesn't desire their destruction. So what is it about God that even when somebody is nailing him to a cross, he wants the best for them? What is it that he thinks well of them even as they're doing that? What is it that he can feel compassion about them even while that's going on? Right? And it's got something to do with the faith in his heart and what he discerns to be going on there. The Bible talks about how we live by faith and not by sight.
Right.
And I need to do a whole message about that, but what it's talking about isn't that you don't live by sight, it's that you don't live by physical sight. It's that faith becomes your sight. Because faith is a very tangible thing. That's why it says faith is the evidence of things hoped for. Right?
Right.
Faith is the evidence. That's a tangible thing it's talking about there. It's not talking about what you believe. It's talking about a very tangible thing called faith. And this faith, when it dwells in a person, causes them to see things a certain way. It causes them to process information in a certain way. Right? And the way it processes information in a person is that even should someone come and nail that person to a cross, they're still able to look at the person and believe the best about them. Now, how is that?
Can I
Right?
say?
Yes, go ahead, Beulah.
Yeah, that was just so good. And, you know, first of all, God doesn't know us according to the flesh. Okay, he knows us according to our original design, who he made us to be. But as you were talking, I realized something else too. That is, God is all-knowing, and all sin comes from a lie. And all of the evil behavior that comes out of people was born from death. And God was there, seeing every step of the way that brought a person to a place where this was all manifest. You know, I always go back to that guy in the alley, the old bum that was, he was kicking a can down an alley, and he was angry, and he was swearing, and a Christian observed and condemned the man in his heart. And the Lord said to the Christian, he's come a long way. I think it's wonderful that he didn't kick the cat. See, that he saw where what caused this man to be where he is. And you know, I can only liken it unto a parent, myself, when my children would act out in such a way and it wasn't acceptable to someone else that was observing. My heart knew why he did what he did, because I saw the hurt that brought forth the bad behavior.
Right.
And so God sees the whole thing, and he knows that that's not you. It's just death that has happened to you that has caused you to be that way, and his love is far greater than any bad behavior.
Right.
It looks right past it.
That's it. And the message is about the bad behavior or the fruit of death that could come out of a person towards us, right? So, and that's critical in the understanding. Most people don't understand what brings forth the works of the flesh.
That's right.
They don't understand what is the cause of it.
Yeah.
The author of Hebrews says, we were all our days in bondage through what? The fear of death.
Mhm.
Paul described all our fruit was the fruit of death in Romans 7. He even described his sin as covetousness, which in his context means to lust after life. That was the fruit of death. Him believing I'm separated from life. And we know when before Christ came, he was separated from life.
Sure.
Death was reigning over people.
Right.
And so God is able to see that death has taken human beings captive. In fact, he's able to see that because human beings weren't really created for death, that should they not see that he's going to conquer their death, their heart is going to be filled with fear, their soul's going to be subverted, and they're going to start trying to preserve their own life in a number of different ways. Now, a person who's dying, if they don't know they have another guy who's preserved their life, they're going to fight to preserve their own life. And the moment they enlist their own ability to preserve their life is the moment all the works of the flesh come out.
Sure.
And so God sees a person who doesn't see what he's done to conquer death, or has rejected what he's done to conquer death, and he sees them living in the fear of death. And so he sees them fighting to make a name for themselves, not seeing or hearing yet or accepting that he's made a name for them. He sees a person who's fighting to preserve their own lives or fighting to bring their own souls peace, not knowing what he's done to bring them peace, not hearing yet or not accepting it that it's the truth. And he sees that what they're doing is with the intent to try to satisfy their own souls.
Sure.
Is there anybody that thinks a person's soul can be filled with contentment or satisfaction or fatness apart from Christ? So that means their soul is full of what? Lack, subversion, emptiness, dissatisfaction, discontentment. That means they're filled with all discontentment. I don't know if we realize it, but when a person's soul is filled with all discontentment, they were never created to feel that in their soul. So they're going to fight, kick, and claw to satisfy that discontentment.
Sure.
By their own ability.
Sure.
So God sees that the reason what's coming out of them is coming out of them is them trying to bring peace to their own soul. And so he's able to look past what they're doing and see that they're suffering. And to see that the fruit that's coming out of them is because they haven't seen that he's the healer of what causes their suffering, or they've rejected it. And so he doesn't impute their works of the flesh to them because he doesn't see it as being with malicious intent. He sees the intent way down at the bottom is just to bring satisfaction to their own soul.
Right.
He sees that's the actual intent. But because the thing they're looking to bring satisfaction can't bring satisfaction, but can only produce more death, he sees that's what's coming out of them. Like the Jewish guys. This is hard for people to hear maybe, but the Jewish guys didn't say, that's God, let's kill him. That's not what they said. They actually thought, this guy is a heretic. They actually thought they were doing the good thing. They didn't think they were doing a bad thing.
Right.
They thought they were doing the good thing. The Jewish mind doesn't understand what it means to have one God, the Lord your God. But they don't understand that the Father's word can be manifested in a bush or in the flesh or wherever. They don't understand the Holy Spirit. So Jesus comes talking about himself. He's one with the Father. So they don't even stop to consider what the guy's saying. They think this guy's saying there's more than one God. We got to take him out.
Sure.
Not only that, they were living in bondage through the fear of death. The Jewish people, because they were carnal, sold, and I don't mean all Jewish people, we're talking about the Pharisaical system. They were carnal, sold under sin. So they thought the accolades and the degrees and the money and the accomplishments and the renown they got through Judaism was the evidence they had life.
Right.
So their idol was this system. And they looked at that system as the thing that justified them. They were grasping onto that thing for dear life. Now Jesus comes along and starts kicking over that system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know he's doing it because it's the truth and that system's really killing them.
Sure.
So we know he's doing it in love. And we know that system they think is giving them life is not the way unto life, it's actually the way unto death. There's a way that seems right unto the man, and it's the way unto death, it says. So they thought this was the way unto life. They were grasping onto it. They said, look at the money we have. Look at the accolades and the reputation we have from this system. This system is what is giving us life. Jesus comes and makes nothing of that system. Now, what do you think that spoke to their hearts?
Ooh, fear.
Fear of
Fear.
losing their life.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Now, as crooked and perverted as it was, we're not disputing that their thought process wasn't crooked and perverted. We're not disputing that what came out of them was crooked and perverted. What we're saying is, what is it that was going on in their soul at the thought of this? Right? Peter even said, whom had you known if he was the Lord of glory, you wouldn't have crucified.
That's right.
Yeah.
He said that.
Right.
Right? Now, this isn't to say that, how do I want to use this language? Because we use these terminologies in a lot of different ways. This isn't to say that they weren't guilty of having committed the sin of rejecting Jesus, or that's not to say that they weren't guilty of having this transgression come out of them. Because the law created transgression, and so most certainly murder is a transgression. And these guys committed it. Right? They killed an innocent guy. So most certainly that is the fruit of death.
Sure.
Right? But Jesus saw them as innocent in the sense that he saw what was deep in their heart wasn't actually to do evil. It's that evil came out of them because they were trying to preserve their life through the strength of the flesh. And there is no life in the flesh. And the moment you enlist this flesh to preserve your life, out is coming murder, hatred, envy, backbiting, all gossip, all those kinds of things, right? And so whenever we see a person who has some works of the flesh manifesting in their life, we can be certain that it's born from them thinking that life is found in something other than God.
Right.
Them trying to satisfy what they feel in their soul through something other than God. Right? One of my good friends has got, a lot of anger issues because of some heinous things that have happened to him in his life. He desires peace in his soul so bad. This guy's soul is so subverted, it's obscene. The weight this guy carries day to day is obscene. Now, he doesn't know the gospel, and he doesn't know what God's done to give him life. He doesn't know what God's done to set his name straight. And so he drinks a lot to try to soothe his soul. So out of him comes much drinking. But the foundation for the much drinking isn't malicious intent. The foundation for the much drinking is that his soul is subverted and he can't deal with it because he doesn't know what God has said in Jesus. Right?
Yeah, in real simple terms, it goes back to what we learned when the church first started, is that our actions are a result of our belief system, and there's only two belief systems.
Yeah.
There's Satan's belief system and there's God's belief system. So if you're not having the fruit of the Spirit in your life, it's the fruit of death. You just look at the fruit and you know the belief system that generates that.
Yeah.
Very simple terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in John 16, Jesus told his disciples in verse 2, he says, they shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think he doeth God service. They think they're doing God a favor by killing those that were preaching Jesus Christ. And that was the mindset that Paul had, you know, when he held the cloaks of those that were stoning Stephen. You know, they thought they were serving God because to them, the Christian faith was heretics.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to the intent was not malicious.
No,
No, the intent was actually
good.
within the system that they knew, they
Yeah,
were accomplishing what the system they knew said to do.
absolutely. Look at Paul. Paul said that, you know, he persecuted the church. You know, he brought them in bonds. But he, you know, it was because he was of the persuasion that this is what God wanted.
Yeah.
And when you look back on his life, he said that according to the law, he was
Yeah.
flawless. According to the law, he was flawless.
Right.
Listen, this is hard for us because, listen, and my friend, he wants nothing more than to be free from the drinking.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't come home and go in the corner and rejoice
Yes.
in his drinking. He's tormented even more by the drinking. So he's tormented by the pain, and then the drinking torments him some more, right? It torments him some more. And it's difficult because the world implements a scapegoating mechanism whereby we say, if we can get justice for the harm other people have caused us, that's where freedom is found.
Yes.
If we can hold them accountable, if we can impute their sin to them, if we can blame them, then that's what will set us free. But Jesus comes and manifests a completely different thing. Here's a human being who's the only human being who had actually never done anything wrong. He was actually innocent, and he actually had the worst transgression that could ever happen to a person happen to him. And in that place, he didn't scapegoat the people. He didn't think, let me blame them. Nor did he think, let me blame myself. And so in the presence of not scapegoating them or himself, he was able to talk with God about what was in his heart. Mm-hmm. And his heart was protected from the lie. Mm-hmm. And so what God would come and do is that God would bring us to a place where we don't scapegoat ourselves or another person, where we just sit with what's in our heart about this thing. And he starts ministering to what's in our heart, because that's what's actually bringing us pain, what we believe about what's happened. And so he comes to clear the record of us and the person. Listen, you're going to blame yourself or you're going to blame the other person. And you might have some of both going on.
Exactly.
Right? God comes and removes the blame from you and from them and says, let's talk about what you feel in your heart. Because if you're blaming yourself, you're busy with that. If you're blaming them, you're busy with that. Listen, you might find some relief in blaming somebody else for the pain you feel, but long term, it will wreck your life.
Yeah.
Long term, it will bring destruction in your life. That actually won't equal freedom. You'll have relief for a little while, but as it keeps going on, it's going to equal bitterness. It's going to equal hurt, more pain. It's going to shape your life. And so God would come and say, listen, we're not going to scapegoat them or you. Let's talk. Right? And then he brings understanding, and he gives you eyes to see what's going on there. And then you're able to see it in a way where you don't impute sin to people. Right? See, Jesus didn't impute their sin to them. And when we talk about impute, he didn't judge their heart as having malicious intent based on what they're doing. He judged their heart as being filled with the fear of death. And this is what the result of the fear of death is. Right? Man, it's so good. Do you see that? Yeah. Now you're not scapegoating them for your pain. You're not seeking justice against them. You're not scapegoating yourself. You're not blaming yourself for what happened to you. But now you see there's something that's entered the world called death that is actually the thing that is bringing everyone pain. So now you want justice against death. Now you start to see God has served me with justice because he has conquered death in the cross and the resurrection. So justice has been served already. Right?
Yeah.
So now I'm not trying to get justice or freedom by seeing justice taken out on a person, but I'm getting freedom in my heart by seeing God has taken vengeance on the death that was causing all people suffering. And that serves my heart with justice. Right? It says the blood of Abel. It says the blood of Jesus cries out better things than the blood of Abel. What did the blood of Abel cry out for? Justice. The blood of Abel cried out for justice. Now, he didn't cry out for vengeance against Cain.
No.
Because the mind of God doesn't cry out for vengeance against people. His blood cried out for vengeance against death. And so how does the blood of Jesus speak better things than the blood of Abel? Because the blood of Jesus is God taking vengeance on death. So the blood of Jesus is giving Abel the justice his heart longed for from the death that came against him.
Right.
His heart wasn't busy thinking, his blood wasn't saying, well, I can have peace if we can kill Cain. Didn't God come and protect Cain? And say, we will not have Cain murdered. How's that? And why is that? You see? And so Abel's blood was not crying out for vengeance against Cain. The injustice that came against Abel was death. And so Jesus' blood served Abel with justice because now he went into Hades and took back the keys from the one who had the power of death, Satan. And now Jesus' blood cries, justice is served. Right? Now our hearts start finding healing from whatever fruit of death we experience in this earth by fellowshipping with what God's done to conquer death. By fellowshipping with what God's done to give us the kind of life that can't be added to or taken from by this world or by what people do to us in this world. The world will come and say, well, if this happened to you, you missed out or you lost out on life. You can't say that about the life of God. Right? And so he set you free from the kind of life that can be added to or taken from by the world. Right. And he gave you a different kind of life that is not able to be built up or decayed by the life that's in the world. That serves your heart with justice in the day you encounter the fruit of death in this earth that's coming out of people. You're set free from thinking they've stolen something from you. You're set free from thinking that you're missing out on something because of what they've done. You're set free from that. Right? That really heals your heart from the pain. Now listen, that is completely contrary to the wisdom in the world. And even like most psychology. Because most psychology will lead you to the place where you got to hold someone accountable for what they've done to you, and then you find relief that way.
It's my father's fault.
Yeah. It's somebody's fault. Let's find them. We'll blame them. You'll feel better. Now, you can experience temporary relief. But as you go on, it will hurt your heart to see the person that way. It will confuse you.
Ooh, yes.
It will mess you up as you go on. You'll slip back into thinking all kinds of different things. Well, what is it that they saw about me? Right? You'll slip back into at some point, what's wrong with me that they did this? Why didn't they want me? Why didn't they value me? Then that leads you off trying to find your value in acceptance or approval from other people. Right?
Yeah.
You guys following that train of
I
thought?
was just going to say, the last 10 minutes has been, I mean, we could stop now. You go back and listen to the last 10 minutes 2 or 3 more times. Just the idea of not blaming yourself or not blaming someone other, but just sitting with the Father and the thought that's in your heart and let him minister to you and talk to you about that. The impact on life that comes from that kind of a thought process and that kind of, just relationship is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's how you'll be healed.
Yes.
From the injustices that have come against you in this world.
Right.
And make no mistake about it, death is injustice.
Mhm.
And if death is injustice, then the fruit of death is also injustice.
Right.
And so we've all experienced things that aren't just. Now, religion has come and told us, oh, you deserve it.
Yeah, right.
Right? Honestly, that doesn't compute with the heart. The reason why you know is that never makes you feel any better. Right? Right?
Someone posted on Facebook tonight that, for us to grow, God makes us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the comment underneath was, yes. And my comment was, no, absolutely not. That God never makes you feel uncomfortable.
No.
He's always on your side, always working good for you. And that it's carnal thinking to believe that God causes you to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Somebody had to blame someone, right?
God is called the comforter.
Yes.
Now listen, what I will say is God's arm is not shortened to where he can only serve us with life if we feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So in the presence of feeling uncomfortable, in the presence of the world coming against us and making us feel uncomfortable, God is right there causing us to overcome that.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
But he
Absolutely.
don't, listen, God don't need to come and make anybody feel uncomfortable. There's something called death in the world.
Yes,
and
right.
it makes everybody plenty uncomfortable. And when I say death, I don't just mean like, when you put a guy in the grave.
No.
I mean, there's tribulation in the world. There's lies in the world that have come against all of our lives. There's happenings in the world that suffices to make all of us feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
God don't need to help it out.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we're going to encounter things that make us feel uncomfortable without God.
Bingo.
We don't need God to do it. You see what I'm saying?
You
We
know,
don't-
All
That
in favor?
That
Yeah.
belief of feeling uncomfortable and growing from the discomfort, that is just a worldly belief that is to justify
Right.
your discomfort.
Yes, totally. Absolutely.
But I've also wanted to say that, this, I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I've been struggling with work and dealing with having my coworkers come to me with their issues, and I feel like they're coming to somebody who is obviously there's a reason why they're coming to me is because I'm just preaching love over them or sharing love with them. But at the same time, I kind of feel like, I have like a vision of my feet are just like so dirty from walking on this earth that I just totally need like Jesus like so much more because I too struggle. I'm not like a superhuman, so, and then, I don't know. So I'm just really glad that we're talking about this. And I think just overall, it's kind of hard for me not to expound to people without, we're at work. So like, I just talk about Jesus regardless, because there's no other way around it to me. Like I can't share the truth about somebody without giving them the beautiful picture that is Jesus, which is true about them too.
Right.
So, I don't know what I was going to say about that, but just, I don't know. I've lost my train of thought right now, but maybe I'll jump back into it.
Well, listen, what you said about your feet feeling like they're getting dirty.
Yeah.
It's a great analogy because the word washes our walk, right? And through the course of walking through the world, that's a great analogy to think of it. And the more we fellowship with Jesus in the midst of that, our feet are constantly being washed.
Yes.
Meaning our walk is constantly being washed. And I don't mean in the sense of, where we're making the focus of our walk being washed on behavior, although behavior is a symptom of it. But what I mean is that as these things can press in on you, or as they can feel burdensome or heavy, or they can make your feet feel dirty, Jesus is girded up, right, with a golden loincloth to constantly wash our feet, right? Constantly wash that away, that heaviness, to wash our walk, right? And it's a spiritual thing that the Holy Spirit is always doing. And for me, I just make myself available to hang out with God. And when I feel burdened, to talk with him about the burden I feel instead of internalizing it. right? I start talking with him about the burden I feel, about the situation I'm in, why it's sticky, right? And before I know it, my thoughts start going to the faithfulness of God and how I'm actually not carrying a burden. He's the one carrying the burden, right? And how he cares more about these people, these lives than I do. And the burden of their salvation isn't on me. That will wash my walk, meaning it will keep me from taking on the burden of them getting free. That allows me to walk free from carrying the burden, which will keep me from enlisting my own ability to try to persuade. And then I'm just free to share. And after I share, I commit it into God's hands. And it's on you, Lord.
Right.
He's already taken it on himself. So it's not like he needs you to tell him, but it's just like something I do with God. Because I got to be honest, I tend to take the burden on myself. And you just ministered to me by what you said about the dirty feet. I tend to take the burden on myself subconsciously for people to experience freedom. And I realize it quicker and quicker, and I get with God and get set free. But even on Sunday, we had the people from Switzerland there. And so I'm thinking, my goodness, his wife doesn't speak English as well as he does. She might struggle to follow some of this. Then I immediately start thinking, after it starts, the first however long, and even some of the end, was quite a heavy theological conversation. I'm actively thinking, are there some people here being left behind by this heavy theological thing? Are they getting blessed? And so then sometimes I'll walk away. Before I know it, my feet are dirty because I've taken on the burden of, was everybody blessed today or only the people that like theology? Right? And before I know it, like it hits me like immediately, God, my heart will connect with God. And it's like, if we want to paint a picture of it, it's like Jesus being girded with a golden loincloth, just like the cloth he had when he washed the disciples' feet. Right. And our feet are being washed over and over and over, right? If that makes any sense.
Amen. And I'm getting my thought back. Sorry, I don't want to cut anybody off, but so what he has been washing my feet with, and my heart, is just innocence, like all over, just innocence. And I feel like that translates so well into every single area of conflict or of confusion, or just whatever my heart is getting cemented over with. Because whether I'm believing something wrong about somebody else, Jesus washes innocence over them, and I see them as innocent, and myself also. And because I feel like before grace, I was so quick to just justify that they're crazy or they have maladaptive personality or whatever. And and then now I feel like for a little while, for actually a couple months, it was turning to myself. I'm like, no, I know that person is innocent, but then I'm like seeing myself as somebody who, like, I'm under grace. What is wrong with me that I am believing these thoughts, or that I'm struggling with this or whatever? But there is nothing wrong with me. I'm innocent from all accusations. And that is just the truth that I have to, well, I don't have to, but it just is always washed over me.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. That even the accusation, listen, and I hope I said this in the message, there's still times, even though you understand this truth, that you need to be stirred up by remembrance of this truth. Where if somebody reaches out and does you harm, that can sting. And you could find yourself having thoughts of that. You know what I'm saying?
You bet.
Right? You could go off for a few minutes and think, what the hell? Yeah. And so I don't say that this message keeps you from ever experiencing that. What I say is the more we walk in this truth, the more we'll find this truth protecting our heart when that happens.
Yes.
It'll wash us. It'll keep us from making those definitive judgments.
Right.
Where we'll walk away upset, but then like the truth will catch us and reveal to us what's really going on there, and we'll find great freedom happening. Right?
I found this last week. I was listening to an encouragement from Jeremiah Johnson. It's good you mentioned him. It reminded me. He was just driving, giving an encouragement, talking about generally just being free in Christ. But it came down to this one word, and I think I forget the rest of the message. He said, it's this self-judgment and blaming, and the word he used was self-loathing. And as soon as he said that word, I was stuck. And I thought, what about what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not pleased with the death coming against me from other people. So I'm Lord, show me the freedom in him, them, her. And so innocence comes, but then like you were saying, that that sense of what's wrong with, actually other gals said, the sense that's what's wrong with me. And then sitting on that for a while and loathing yourself, that all the accusations that come with it. I let it happen. I cause it to happen. Something's not washed clean in me. But sitting on that for a little while, self-loathing. Jeremiah was just encouraging to let that go from you as quick as you let go from you the accusation towards someone else. But I hadn't thought about it until he said that word, and then I thought, that is what I have been doing and holding. See, I had that like a sacred cow, I guess I hadn't realized how long I was holding on to self-loathing. And I thought, he's washed us all. He's washed us all, and I hadn't appropriated it for myself. I hadn't, it's for me. It was for me. Anyway, so
it really is first your understanding your innocence.
Yes.
That sets you free to see other people as innocent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's like that little clip that Cindy did. Do you feel it? We're not going to now judge ourselves as evil. Should we feel it when the fruit of death comes against our lives?
Right.
We're not going to now act like we shouldn't feel it. And what's wrong with us that we do feel it? One of the worst things that I did with the gospel as a young guy, because I was into perfectionism, was I had this view that the gospel was going to get me to the place where nothing ever impacted me, ever. And that's evidence that I was as I ought to be.
Sure.
So if my soul was never subverted, I'm as I ought to be.
Right.
If I never felt anger towards anybody, I'm as I ought to be. If I never felt frustrated with anybody, I'm as I ought to be. Well, that's living by the knowledge of good and evil, where I had a knowledge that this is good and this would be evil. So if my soul subverted, that's evil, not good. If I feel frustrated, that's evil, not good.
Right.
If I feel angry for a second, that's evil and not good. And then I would judge myself by that, right? But what happens is when you understand the impact that death has on your heart, you find your heart rejecting accusation because it makes sense to you why it could impact you negatively.
Sure.
You start to think, nah, duh, like when we were in high school, nah, duh, we would say that to each other.
That's right.
It's like, nah, duh, if the fruit of death comes shooting out at me, I might not like it. So, nah, duh, that I might feel frustrated. And in understanding the impact that death has on the soul of a human, and that humans were never created to see death, you find something in you where you give yourself grace. Because you don't judge yourself as evil because you felt the impact of death.
Amen.
Jesus felt the impact of death. Yeah. He sweat blood. The only thing about him is he didn't say, what's wrong with me that I'm sweating blood? Right. When he hung on the cross, man, he felt that. He wasn't like, oh, who cares? No. It says he tasted the weakness we felt. He felt the weight of it. And so it's a very real thing. He can reach out his hand and say, me too, man, and I'm the sinless one.
Yeah. And that's how he is the merciful high priest.
Yes. Right.
Because he experienced everything we experienced.
Right.
You can.
So, do you feel it? Right? And so you can hear not to judge yourself. You can hear you should forgive. You can hear that all those things will give you a better life. Or you can hear a word that has the power to bring those things forth in you, apart from telling you you can do it. Right?
Yes.
And so there's a difference between saying you got to forgive, you got to stop judging yourself, and preaching a word that brings those things forth. Right?
One way is effort, the other way is easy.
One way will help you to sit down at the feet of Jesus and just hear. The other way is like Martha, thinking I could stop, right? And laboring and toiling, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not accusing anybody of doing that. I'm just making that statement for us to know, right? I love what Bertie said. We're not in need of another outpouring. We're in need of understanding the gospel.
Amen.
And it's true.
Amen.
We're not in need of another outpouring. God didn't walk in liberty on this earth because of a revival or an outpouring. He walked in liberty on this earth because faith was dwelling in his heart, discerning everything for him. And discerning everything in a way that always equaled freedom, that always equaled liberty, that always produced comfort, even in uncomfortable situations. So uncomfortableness would come. He didn't despise himself for it. He didn't judge himself as evil or being separated from life because he felt uncomfortable, but he judged his union with God, right? He made a judgment about himself based on what God said. Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. So what he's saying there is God had just told Jesus, you are my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased.
Right.
And so Jesus sees himself dying, and he doesn't say that physical bread is what will bring peace to my soul, but the word that the Father has spoken over me right before I came out here, perishing in my body, that's what gives me peace right now. And so he didn't judge himself as evil because he felt uncomfortable. He judged himself by the word God spoke about him, right? And it's so important for us to understand that, because we're so busy trying to get a feeling. And it's not that a feeling is bad, but if we think we're waiting for like some magic wand moment, like some outpouring or some revival, and that's going to be our victory, we're missing it.
Yes.
There is an outpouring that's already gone on. It's that the spirit of grace and supplication is moving through the earth like it hasn't in a long time. And people are having ears and eyes to see what the word that was made flesh in Jesus actually is. That is what's going to bring forth God's life in us, right?
Yes.
And it is. His word will bring forth the act of forgiveness in you. His word will bring forth these things in you, where you'll go through life and you'll say, oh my gosh, I'm not even keeping a record of what that guy did to me.
Yeah, right.
Like in ministry, where a guy completely done you wrong and like stole money from you and all those kinds of things, you find yourself thinking, man, I wonder if I can get that guy to come preach at the church again so we can bless him. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because I can, instead of judging the guy by the fruit of the flesh that came out of him towards me, I can look past it and see that this guy still has a good word to preach, even though he might have some bondage or fear in the area of money that caused him to do that.
Sure.
And so I don't judge him by the thing he did to me because he's afraid of how he's going to survive in ministry. I'm able to look past that and see that he does have something in his heart that's pure about the gospel. And I can bring him in. And I can still have fellowship and walk with him,
Right.
instead of judging him and separating the thing. Does that make some sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's
it's
great.
really important that it's wonderful to talk about what we should do. And I mean, no, it's not wonderful to talk about what we should do. Let me just rephrase that. It's not wonderful to talk about what we should do. It's wonderful to talk about what God's life will do to us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then speak about how it does it so we can gain understanding, right? And that's where the Spirit will straighten out your language. If I look back at the way I preached, I used to talk about how we must rest, right? Now, because I saw rest was good.
Yeah.
Rest is good.
Sure.
But saying we must rest does not possess the ability to bring forth rest.
Right.
What it will do is cause you to try to rest through your own ability, which will actually cause you to walk after the flesh, right? Because if you're trying to rest, listen, you're really just walking after the flesh still, right? But now what I do is I preach a word that has rest contained in it, that should it be heard, that should it be believed on, it's a seed that will give birth to the fruit of rest in person. Right?
Yeah.
Same thing with forgiveness. This message that I preached about why God believes the best about everyone. Inside of that message, we talked about the way this truth will guard our hearts and help us to walk in liberty. But inside of that message is a seed that possesses the ability to bring it forth in a person. It doesn't say you should do this. What it does is it brings it forth in you where you find it happening to you.
Right.
And after the fact, you think, wow, That's a blessed life, right? Like I didn't work some intellectual principle when I found I wasn't keeping a record of the wrongs this guy committed against me. I wasn't working a principle. I just found as I walked on, my heart was free from it and was looking back and saying, you know what? I could see that guy's in fear. I could see that guy's in fear of money. And I could see that's caused him to do some things that he probably wouldn't do. Then you know what happens? This is what it's called restoring someone in meekness. I can see that there might be some areas in my life where I could be impacted by fear, right? I see in ministry, there was a time where I was very impacted by the fear of Becky's life and what was happening to Becky through the course of ministry. And if Becky was going to be okay, and I saw how that tried to move on me and how it tried to impact my thoughts and the way that I would do things. And so it was easy for me to see how someone could be taken captive, right? It was easy to not despise them. It was easy to not keep a record of their wrong, to not impute it to them, to believe actually the best about them, right? Instead of thinking that, what the, you know?
Right.
Does that make some sense?
Absolutely.
Please don't hear what I'm saying as a carnal principle. I didn't just give you a cut and dry thing that you're going to go apply to everybody. I could also encounter somebody in ministry that might do something that even though I wouldn't judge their heart as malicious, I might see they're in so much bondage, I'm most certainly not going to bring them into preach. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's varying levels of discerning it, right? It just so happens with this example and this guy, I think he does have a lot of good things to say. But I see in this area, it's a tough area for a minister with money, right? It's a scary thing not having a method of money, especially if you're trying to walk into the belief that tithing and sowing and reaping ain't about money, and you're just starting to try to believe that. You can be confronted with, how am I going to survive? Right?
Yeah.
You can be a little bit afraid.
You can always go get a job.
Amen. You can go get a job. You can always get a job.
Preach on the side.
That's right.
Preach on the side. That's right.
Bivocational.
Absolutely. I hope that makes some sense. Everything we're saying there about that.
This made awesome sense.
And
You know, I think I shared this with you one time, but it was many years ago. I used to, when we had the church, I used to spend my days, you know, just with the Lord and studying and listening to God. And he had given me a great revelation this day, and my husband came home from work. And stupid, I tried to share it with him before washing his feet. You know what I mean? Because he had the world, he had the work, and he wasn't being spiritually minded. His mind was all on work, and he couldn't understand what I was saying. And he called me a heretic. And so, and he was really nasty, you know. And I got so mad. I just blew up at him. And I went upstairs and I slammed the bedroom door and I said, Lord, I have had a wonderful day with you today. And he comes home and he ruins it and he makes me mad. And there was an understanding that I got from the Lord that day that totally changed my life, because I understood him to be saying, Beulah, if I change Jim so he doesn't make you mad, that's just one person. There's the whole rest of the world. He said, but I want to so fill your heart with my love that nobody can ever disturb you. And that understanding, I was blown away, and I'm like, Lord, now that is freedom. Because I was always praying, change this one, change that one. I'm like, no, let me know this love that never fails, and nobody will be able to get up my nose again. And that love is the most, that's why I always say, love is the most powerful force in the universe. If your heart is filled with the love of God, it's just, you're invulnerable.
Yeah, you're walking on water. Like we
You
said.
got it.
Yeah, what was us if we need everybody to act right for us to be able to experience, for us to be happy in this world? Well, listen, if you think that'll work, you can try that for a little while. You're going to be broken soon.
I tell you, it's kind of crazy, but you can do something really, really stupid, say something really stupid, behave a certain way that's is not good, and walk away from that and just know deep down in your heart that the Lord still loves you, that he's not holding anything against you, and you feel the healing come to your heart right after acting like an idiot. And it's just like it heals your heart, and whoever you offended over there, it becomes a natural thing to care about that person, how they were affected.
Yep.
It's a completely natural thing. Why, you know, how the naturalists, plenty of them are like contrary to Christianity. If they knew how God created nature, and the natural is his way. He wants us to be natural.
Yeah.
And we want to do it ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah, we want to do it the way it's contrary to nature.
Contrary to nature, actually.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's contrary to us, actually.
Mm.
And a good message to go with that message for anybody that doesn't remember is the message. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. Right?
You know, I was just going to say that, Greg, because you know something, when your heart is filled with the love of God, if somebody is offended in you and you haven't done anything wrong, but their heart is offended in you, I am free to be able to go up to them and tell them that I love them. And if I've done anything to offend them, I am terribly sorry. You know what? That breaks it right there.
Yeah.
I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me that I've got to humble myself before them and say that I'm sorry, because it doesn't make any difference. It's all I want to do is heal their heart from being offended so that they can receive the good stuff that I want to give them.
Yeah.
Because it all comes down, it's not about me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're free to consider what's coming against their heart.
That's right.
You're not trying to prove you didn't do anything to hurt them.
Right.
You're more concerned with them seeing the truth about your heart towards them. And when you come with that, they see it. When they see that you come not trying to justify yourself, but you just come concerned for what the hurt they feel, their heart feels, oh, this person does love me. Yeah. And it quenches the thing, like right there.
And listen, the world don't see a lot of that.
No.
And you know, for a long time, years ago, I had this gentleman with his children coming to church, and his wife wasn't a believer. And she started coming, and she'd sit there like this and look at me, give me dirty looks the whole time I'm preaching. And right after the service, I'd go right up to her and I said, "Can I have a hug?" And she'd go, "No." And I go, "Well, I love you." And every week I'd do the same thing, and every week she'd reject me. But I knew that it wasn't me, you know, that she had something just binding her up, you know. And it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me a bit, because I was free to be me. And, you know, finally, after months, I went up for a hug, and she gave it to me. And she said, "You know, Pastor," she said, "I tried and I tried to get you angry at me, and I couldn't break you." She says, "And you broke me." And you know, the love of God never fails. But you've got to realize, you know, Jesus said, hey, they hated me, they're going to hate you. It's not you. It's the spirit that you have is an offense to the spirit of the world.
Yeah.
And if you continue to love, you're going to win.
Sometimes hating is easier to deal with. Sometimes the apathy can be a little more.
You mean when someone hates you or when you're hating someone else?
No, when someone hates you.
Okay.
When you know, hey, they don't like me,
Mhm.
you know. But sometimes when they just kind of go, you know, indifferent to you,
Yeah.
that can be more difficult to deal with than someone just actually saying, I hate your guts.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why you find your justification in the word God spoke about your life in Jesus. We talked about this on Sunday at the Bible study. We're all looking for something to get down on one knee and praise us. We just are. Sure. We were created to find life from that. The thing is, we weren't created for anything in this world to give us life by getting down on one knee. Whether it's our job, we want to be worshiped by our job, by the people in our lives, by finding a spouse, by what our spouse thinks of us, by what our spouse does, by our kids, whether we have kids, right? And the only thing that can satisfy our hearts is finding that justification, seeing God got down on one knee in Jesus and baraked us, right? He called us his beloved sons and daughters, right? And then that satisfies your soul, right? And that's the only thing. Then you don't really care what people think. You'll stop caring, right? You just find it happen to you where you don't care.
Right.
You don't judge what they're doing as being a word about you because your heart stops looking for evidence. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's a magical thing that happens to you when your heart stops looking for evidence that you are as you ought to be.
Right.
When your heart ceases from looking for evidence because it's actually been persuaded that the evidence is over here and you already have it. It's already done, right? Jesus was persuaded that he already was. Here's the evidence. So he wasn't walking through the world looking for evidence that he is the Son. He wasn't thinking, well, if I can get 12 guys to follow me, and then we can get, 70, and then we can multiply that to 500, that's to be the evidence that I'm the Son.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't think that, right? And so that's what the gospel will come to do. It's an amazing thing walking through this life where you're no longer looking for evidence. You'll really be set free, and the gospel will do that in you. It will persuade you that you've been approved of so much in God that your heart will begin to live from the place of the only place the evidence is in Jesus seated at the right hand of God. So you no longer consider anything else as evidence. So then you're not scrutinizing what people say or do or how they act. You're not looking at that. You're not even judging it anymore. I mean, that's one of the symptoms of being washed clean from the knowledge of good and evil, where you judge yourself as good or evil by people's reaction to you.
Right.
It's kind of interesting how Jesus said, unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it remains fruitless. And that's exactly what he did. He fell to the ground and died, and the result of that was a lot of fruit.
Mm-hmm.
But he, on this earth, saw no fruit whatsoever.
Right.
In other words, he didn't need to see that to be fruitful.
Right. Yeah. Or to believe he was as he ought to be.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were no other sons and daughters of God yet.
That's right.
Right? Before he died. He was alone
Yeah.
there. Right? He was just persuaded. Yeah. Right? The evidence isn't whether I can see this fruit. The evidence is in the word God spoke about my life.
That's
right? Jesus didn't appear into the heavenly place with all the good fruit that he had.
No.
And say, look at all the good fruit, Daddy.
That's
Am
right.
I really the Son?
Yeah.
No. He appeared with blood, saying, not by the good fruit that came forth, right? But by your word. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You know, in the River Jordan, when Jesus was baptized and the Father said, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. In the power of that word, he went into the wilderness and was tempted by the devil. and came out victorious. And it's as simple as that. We need to hear that word. You are my beloved child in whom I'm well pleased, and live in the reality of that word all the days of our life. And to stay in the reality of that word, I continue to listen to wonderful messages that you preach.
As do we all.
That last message you preached, it was just, I've listened to it so many times, and the analogies you gave was so wonderful. The one about the life God. I mean, people need to listen to that over and over and get their minds and their hearts washed, because that is such a beautiful word that will set people free. Like you said, if somebody breaks into your house to steal bread because they're hungry, are you going to fault them for it? And it's to be able to look at a person and see that it's not them, but it's the death that's working in them that's causing them to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just to be able to separate the person from the actions.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why Paul would say they were a slave to sin.
Yeah.
That's why he uses that language. Death will make you a slave to sin. And in that context, the sin that it's talking about there would be the fruit of death, right? Death will make you a slave to the fruit of death, right? If you see yourself as joined to death, then your husband is death. And guess what your husband's going to bring forth in you? Fruit unto death.
Fruit unto death, right?
Right? That's why he uses the word of being enslaved,
Yeah.
right? He talks about being alive to God and dead to sin. He talks about God there. It's the word for the Godhead, not just Father. And so he's talking about consider yourself alive to the life of God, meaning the cherubims that had the tree of life marked off are out of the way. The veil's been torn. Consider yourself alive to God's eternal life. Consider yourself dead to death, right? Because if you consider death to be reigning over you, or you consider yourself to be separated from life, that's going to make you a slave to sin. Because if you think you're separated from life, you're going to labor and toil to try to get life. And then that's going to bring forth thorns and thistles, right? But if you consider yourself alive to God and alive to his incorruptible life, and you begin thinking nothing can be stolen from my life and nothing can be added to my life. My life isn't subject to decay. My life isn't subject to the tribulation in this world. That will make you a slave to righteousness, meaning the fruit of God's life. Yeah. That will take you captive to love and peace and joy and kindness, where the things just coming out of you, right? Mm-hmm. And so the gospel is exhorting us and persuading our hearts that we're braided together with eternal life. And what kind of a life is this eternal life? What does it look like in comparison to the death and the tribulation in the world? How does it impact the death and the tribulation in the world? It's like if we could take a little petri dish and we could put eternal life in that little petri dish, and we could interject some darkness or some death in that petri dish, and then watch what eternal life does to that death, right? That's what the gospel tells us over and over. It shines a light on what this life is, how it reacts, and what it does when it's faced with the death and the tribulation in the world. It swallows it. It overcomes it. It conquers it. And when you begin to be persuaded that that's your life, man, you become a slave to righteousness. Your life becomes animated with love and peace and joy. And you ain't trying to be loving or peaceful or full of joy. It's just happening, right? That's why Paul uses the word slave. A slave is a person taken captive. Paul wasn't like choosing words for no reason. You see what I'm saying? He was very deliberate in the words that he used. There's a reason why he talks about being a slave to sin and being a slave to righteousness. He's talking about your members being taken captive by something, right? Good stuff.
I so liked earlier this week, hey Beulah. I was a little low in the morning and I clicked on Facebook, and there's Beulah talking before she goes to the gym, and you were talking about sweet communion and how that happens when you think the thoughts Jesus thinks about you, and in that place there's this joy that springs forward, and you're there. And I don't know what happened. Was it 10 minutes? I couldn't stop typing, and it was sort of just a joy fest. I don't know what it was. It was amazing. And it went on like all day because I just kept thinking about the closeness that came from that sweet communion, thinking the thoughts he thinks about me. And it was amazing. And I just thought, what is there else to meditate on? What else is there to think about? It was a filling that pushed out the other things of anxiety and fear and aggravation, doubt, self-doubt, etc., right? But I was just, if anybody gets a chance to just go hear her for a little bit, it was so exciting. It was simple, but it was beautiful. It was encouraging him, his thoughts.
Post it on the Facebook page if you think about it. On the
Yeah,
Bible study
put it in
page.
the Bible study page.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was so good. And it took 10 minutes.
One of the things I want to do at some point is have some type of conference here, but also within that conference include what we would call, for lack of a better term, training in counseling.
Yeah.
Right? Because we got a whole lot of counselors that are part of the church that really understand grace. And it would be great for us to come together and be able to share these kind of things with them that can give them discernment when they're counseling people. Yeah. Right? Because this isn't to disparage people, but a whole lot of Christian counseling really takes its cue from psychology. Sure. Just for not knowing any different.
Or takes its cue from Christianity under the law. Either cue is really bad.
Either cue is really bad. But we have a whole lot of people in our church that understand this dynamic. And it could really help to have, for lack of a better term, again, seminars, right? Where we could also bring in people and hold like little groups in between like messages where we could sit and teach people how to counsel through the spirit of truth, how we could teach people how to counsel by discerning the person's circumstances through Christ.
Right.
Because that's really what you're doing.
Yes.
You're discerning what's happened to them in their life through the word that's Christ.
Right.
And when they can see themselves in the face of Jesus, when they can see their life in the face of Jesus, that equals freedom. Yeah. Not just the glory. When you think something horrible's happened to you and you can see yourself in the face of Jesus on the cross, it discerns the thoughts and intents of your heart, and it brings great healing, right? And so that's one of the things that's on my heart somewhere down the road. I don't know how to put together the logistics of it or any of that, but that's one of the things that is really on my heart to do. The people from Switzerland, I just briefly talked, because they asked, what do I spend most of my time doing? And ironically, I spend most of my time meeting with people, right? In between, in the week. And I enjoy that. And I get massive revelation by meeting with people. And it's amazing just watching the Holy Spirit come and discern their life, right? And it just reveals Christ in the situation. I was talking about that. And they just seemed really captivated by that thought in comparison to what most Christian counseling is, which is very just much worldly, right? In the name of Christian counseling, right? Yeah. So, man, you guys be believing for me for that, with me, for that coming about someday, because I think that can really help people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's great hearing a Sunday message. This isn't to disparage the value of Sunday message, but sometimes when a person is experiencing darkness, they struggle to connect, right? And sometimes when you take time to meet with them face to face, and you can discern the message in their life for them, right? They can have like an aha moment, like a revelation. Yes. Like a revelation. Yeah. Right? Yeah, it becomes personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's part of, I think that's part of the human design, is to be face to face with somebody, talking with them. I mean, it could even be like this, like through video. But having that communion also within the fellowship is really, a really big part of it.
Amen. It's great stuff.
Yep.
And I'm going to I'll get the Bible study from Sunday posted by tomorrow. I've been running behind because I've been slammed.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about tonight? We covered some good stuff, let me tell you. Really good stuff. All right. Well, I will get the video out as soon as I can this evening.
Oh.
Oh,
I was
wait,
waving.
Linda.
Oh, you're waving. Oh, but that's okay, because I did have a verse in my mind there with the share, which I think is appropriate, was that to humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. And that's what the whole thing is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just humbling ourselves and believing what he believes and thinking what he thinks about us.
Yeah, and he'll exalt us.
Totally exalt us.
Right? You
Yep.
say you don't have to exalt yourself. You don't have to make a name for yourself. You don't have to give yourself life. It's my good pleasure to do it. It's not even like a chore. It's not even like, well, since you can, I guess I'll do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's his good pleasure. Right? He
Good
gets happy
pleasure.
about it.
That's right.
He
He
gets
loves
happy.
doing it.
He gets happy about taking you and seating you at the right hand.
That's right.
He wasn't like begrudgingly doing it.
No.
I guess that's what we'll do. He was all like, yes.
You know, when we humble ourselves
Right, you're exalting
in
him.
the sight of the Lord, and we believe what he believes about us, then that humility is construed by the legalist as pride, because you're agreeing with God that you're wonderful.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they don't get it, you know?
Yep.
But that's true humility.
Amen.
That's right. You disagree with what God
said.
with God.
Right.
You agree with
I
God.
want you to call yourself a worm of the dust, you know?
Yeah,
that would not be humbling yourself.
that would be denying Jesus.
Right.
That's right.
To call yourself a
Unrighteous.
worm of the dust would be denying Jesus, and Jesus would
Yeah.
deny that.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly. All right.
Shadow.